But that'll never happen, ever, because what determines the final content of all healthcare communications is compliance and lawyers whose ass cheeks are so tight they take no risk whatsoever to have any empathy in anything.
Your business's success depends on relationships, relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm super excited to connect with Matthew Zachary. He is dubbed the People's Voice in Healthcare by People magazine, turned a brain cancer diagnosis at 21 into a global movement for patient empowerment. And as a founder of Stupid Cancer, he launched the young adult cancer movement and revolutionized patient advocacy with the Stupid Cancer Show, the first healthcare talk radio show in 2007. His podcast, Out of Patients, and documentary, The Cancer Mavericks, cemented him as the podfather of healthcare. Now, as principal of Matthew Zachary Worldwide, he leads a media, consulting, and think tank agency disrupting healthcare marketing with bold, empathy-driven storytelling. A Brooklynite with a sharp Gen X edge, Matthew's mission is simple: amplify patient voices, challenge the system, and inspire change. Matthew is also still here. Congrats on amplifying patient voices and inspiring change, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Carl. By the way, my late brother-in-law was a Carl with a K too, so there's a bit of a kindred energy going on here.
Nice. Well, woo to the spelling, not to the late part.
Yes.
So I big fan of everything you're doing. I love it so much. I'm a brain tumor survivor myself, so patient advocacy and improving the quality of care is something I'm really passionate about. And so I'd love to discuss with you how the move towards more personalized medicine is disrupting the healthcare marketing process. Because it seems like before, companies can just kind of put out these broad messaging, but now with how much personalization is going on, it doesn't seem as effective as it used to be. So tell me more about that aspect of what you're working on.
Well, the personalization part is a nice little nugget of progress compared to, my history 30 years ago. Life was different. So I bring a perspective that every problem today is better than basically nothing existing and everyone dying 30 years ago. But I also have a decade in marketing and agency world. So my perspective is really skewed in terms of, I don't think of patients as like a checkbox. These are Americans, these are humans that are in a situation they don't want to be in. And if you put the perspective from that vantage, it's less patient advocacy and more consumer protection. And with the advent of choice and all these wonderful new solutions that are out there, that choice is often taken away, perhaps unintentionally, because you're walking into a retail store you never expected to shop in. And the decision to put you in touch with a treatment on a shelf, on an aisle, you don't know where that is, and someone else is paying for it, despite the fact that your doctor might recommend it, puts a lot of hurdles in the way of people actually getting what they need. So I'm all for science and progress and making things that exist to help people die less and suffer less. But the root of the problem is still, we have to stop blaming the patients for not knowing to be their own advocates, for not knowing how to make critical decisions, for not knowing what shared decision making is, because the burden isn't on them. And the flip side of that is industry has yet to catch up to the idea that the patient really is the end user, but they don't make any money on the patient. They make money on the prescriber. So this is just the flaw in the American healthcare system, where it doesn't matter what happens to the patient as long as someone gets paid.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge flaw in the whole point of healthcare is to make sure the patients are taken care of. And when they don't really have they're not able to advocate for themselves well because they don't really know what's going on and they don't know what their options are. And in the end, the money never really comes from them. I can see how that's just a big, giant elephant in the room that people really need to stop ignoring and really focus on. And I remember when I was very lucky because when I was diagnosed, like I remember seeing a side of like my mom I wasn't used to seeing, where she was a huge advocate when I was in the ICU, just like, you guys need to get on, because they would try and run tests like multiple times, like they would give me the wrong meds, and she was just like, no, you guys already did this stuff. And like I wasn't used to seeing her being such a strong advocate on that sort of stuff, but it's sad that she had to do that because they just weren't like the patient care, the quality of the patient experience wasn't there. And so I can see how that over an entire sector, entire industry is a huge problem.
Yes. And that's systemic. And I haven't seen anything change very much, which is unfortunate.
And so what do you think, what are some like potential solutions, or what could companies do to address this that would help them stand out and be kind of the ones zigging when others are zagging, so to speak, to help them really like be that differentiating voice in the market and really help their business scale?
I think stop with the jargon first and foremost, that this is about trust, and healthcare in America is one of the least trusted experiences that people don't want to have. And trust typically starts with your doctor, and that typically is where trust begins, ideally in hopefully a majority utopian situation. But once they're thrust into this world of compliance and very very binary, artificially created scenarios they don't want to be in, the empathy drops off, and they're not being sort of given the hug that they'd like to have, or maybe they didn't know they needed to have, to guide them through a system that it was not designed for a customer, it's designed for a provider. And look, I'm deeply cynical. I like to be proven wrong all the time. There are minor success stories here and there, but I focus largely on oncology and rare disease. And every now and then there's a glimmer of hope when some empathy-driven conversation starts, but it typically happens in the nonprofit space, which are underrepresented in the patient experience. Unless you happen to know one exists or happen to find one on Google search, they are the hugs patients need to know what kind of how to deal with this and have a little grace going through something tragic for themselves and their families. But at the end of the day, I'm still jaded and cynical that we still see happy cancer patients dancing on TV and commercials. That is not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, that marketing, a lot of the marketing for pharmaceuticals, the imagery doesn't reflect have anything to do with like what the real patient experience is like. And just that disconnect is often really jarring. And again, it doesn't help with the trust building aspect that patients need.
Right.
And so when it comes to the marketing side of things, what would you think would be, or if you were designing some of these ad campaigns, how would you do it differently? What would you think would be more appropriate or effective?
We're sorry you have to see this ad. It means you're fucked by something. We're really sorry. We're here to help. But that'll never happen, ever, because what determines the final content of all healthcare communications is compliance and lawyers whose ass cheeks are so tight they take no risk whatsoever to have any empathy in anything.
It's really a risk aversion and lack of, or basically over restrictive compliance stuff that keeps it from happening.
Yes, and the tone deafness of what it has to be. If you have cancer and you see an ad for a drug for cancer and the side effects include cancer, that is not the right way to talk to people.
Yeah, there's a whole meme of just like the side effects of some of these medications seem almost worse than what they're treating.
You know how much money this country spends in healthcare comms every year on wasted TV shows and TV commercials and ads? $26.2 billion a year. Wasted because they think they have to do it. And we're one of only two countries in the world that allow that crap to happen.
And so what would it take to, do you think, to change that? Or what would you, what would you think so, like instead of allowing those sort of ads, basically the US should be like kind of banning those same pharmaceutical ads so it's not just even an option? Or what's kind of the alternative that would be better for the patients, do you think?
Again, this will never happen, but if I could snap my fingers, take that 26 billion and invest it in nonprofit infrastructure.
Yeah, it's frustrating how so much of the it's just kind of like self-serving, or it's ineffective and kind of wasted, where there's so much put into the like drug development and stuff, but it's not really ever in the actually solving the real problems that patients care about. It's just about kind of this machine feeding itself.
Yeah, I put this call out to the industry. Show me a success story where someone was on Twitter, they saw an ad for a drug, they were triggered to call their doctor right away and tell them they wanted this, and the doctor said, sure. Show me that that has happened once for $26 billion in ad spend, and maybe I'll give you a little grace.
Yeah, it seems like in any other industry, you wouldn't, if you spent that much money on an ad campaign that people didn't follow the call to action for, you wouldn't ever run that sort of ad again.
No, you'd be fired.
So what's keeping this, like that? It seems like even if with all the compliance and the risk aversion stuff, like if you see that it's not working, why would they keep doing it?
Because they're used to and they know nothing else.
But if they're so focused on wanting like what they like the ROI and the growth and success, you think they would realize this isn't working at this point.
You think they would. That is correct.
That is kind of mind-boggling how.
It's painfully sad.
So what do you think would take? What would you think would take to kind of jolt them out of this like cycle?
If you can prove, and I'm going somewhere with this, if you can prove that not wasting your money on TV shows and internet ads and pop-up banners on Instagram helped you make money instead of spend it, they would do that. So the financial incentive doesn't exist for them to stop doing this.
Which seems weird, because if it's not working, you think they realize that it's not working. That's the financial incentive, is to do something that works instead of what's not working right now.
Have you met our healthcare system?
Oh yeah.
This is how it works, and it's terrible.
It's just a kind of a matter of it just being so big and bulky that the inertia to
Yes,
move it
it's
is
an inertia issue. You can't slow down the tank.
So what, if you can't slow it down, is there any way to at least like divert or kind of like change its direction some?
The missing equation here is that, yes, it all comes down to your relationship with a doctor, in my world, an oncologist, who should have, and most likely does, have the Hippocratic oath tattooed in their eyeballs, that knows what is best for you. But it's not the patient's job to know what's best for them. It's their job to know what they'd like to have happen. Yes, I'd like to not die. We can cross that off. That's everybody. I'd like to see my kids graduate. I'd like to be able to walk. I'd like to be able to exercise. I'd like to get, I'd like less pain. That's what this comes down to. You go into a car dealership, they'll build the Camry around you. It doesn't work that way in healthcare.
So with all the new kind of more personalized medicine and more like the more of an emphasis on like a wellness and prevention stuff that is with some of the apps and the wearable devices, is that any sort of sign that there's a shift that's possible because people are able to get more personalized like prescriptions and personalized like exercise and like regimens and diets and stuff? Is that kind of moving in the right direction, do you think?
Well, you just waltzed over to an entirely different industry. You're talking now consumer health. Consumer health is very different than oncology. You're talking about what I would almost consider like direct to consumer products and services for wellness while you're already sick. And they have the right to use traditional CPG marketing strategies. That's their job. BetterHelp is a good example. Athletic Greens. There are plenty of apps and services that are out there that can use regular marketing tactics to hit people up. But that's entirely different because then at least you may have a choice to know what your options are because you're being targeted with things you didn't know you need. That's just retail. It's things you wish you didn't have to need. I want a Camry. I don't want to use BetterHelp. But it's the polar opposite of the flip side, which is in direct patient marketing and medical marketing, which is it's not your decision. It's someone else's decision. Your doctor could say, I want you on this. Insurance says, no, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, so I see that distinction in how it's, yeah, the game's not the same there.
Right. It's a
And yeah,
bifurcation.
but do you think that if patient expectations for more and like if the whole like your whole thing about patient advocacy, if enough of the patients um are more used to personalized stuff and start kind of demanding it from their organizations, could that be a potential way to try and start move some of this inertia in the right direction if more people are kind of used to the personalized stuff on the CPG side?
If you're talking like Grail and blood tests and Walgreens Cologuard stuff, that's different. That's completely different because then you're empowering people to make consumer choices. But yet you're going to the doctor and the doctor says, I want you on this. And someone else can say no, or there's an agenda with the health system where they prioritize this treatment. You're out of control. Patients have no control when they're in the health system, when it comes down to someone else determining what's best for them. Ideally, your doctor ideally you get what you want that he thinks or she thinks that you need. But no amount of screaming is going to make something change in the industry. It's not like you're threatening a district reelection by shaming someone who doesn't believe in your policies. Patients demanding genetic testing or biomarker testing or immunotherapies doesn't work unless it's policy. That's the only, if you're looking at what advocacy can mean, it's like 30 different ways to skin a cat. Getting patients aware of choices is policy and not often practice. And that's a longer game and a bigger challenge. So it doesn't matter if 100% of patients say, I want a genetic test. Nothing's going to make that free. Nothing's going to convince every doctor to say, okay. Nothing's going to make every insurance policy say, fine. I hate to be the cynic, but I feel I'm the only one that just speaks this way. In the industry, I don't pay lip service. This is not a buyer's market. There's no demand for oncology care.
So yeah, it's hmm. I understand where your cynicism is coming from, and your view on it, because it is very frustrating just to even can see the bloated mess that it is there, and how um, entrenched the bad habits are with the system, and um, yeah, it sucks. Well, despite all that, I want to thank you so much for being connected with me today, Matthew. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Matthew, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.